Yeah, so welcome everybody. My name is Denise Baril. I'm the founder of the Grant Sherpa. For people that don't know who we are a company that was created to help innovation and tech companies across Canada understand the grant world. One of the things that we do is we help startups and scaling companies or going global or already global to help them understand where the funding lies in the grant space along their roadmap to grow and scale. We help make connections to the industry partners in the provinces and federally to be able to help them get in front of the right people when they need to at the right time. And then we connect them to experts like Sep, who you're going to meet today. So I just wanted to say before Sep, I get Sep to kind of introduce himself, is one of the things that along the journey of working with these tech and innovation companies across Canada, a pain point has developed quite consistently for non-tech founders. And that pain point seems to be that, non-tech founders have these incredible ideas. They figured out, they could be an industry expert. They figured out a solution to something they know that they're connected to deeply in their space or their industry or their expertise. And then when they try to adapt and say, hey, I want to develop the software, the development, the technology to kind of be able to do this or to automate this, there often is a gap between the communication of what that tech founder is communicating and then what they get the developer to do. And the reason I'm bringing this up today is because I'm working with a lot of clients who come to me and say, hey, Denise, I got a software developer to develop this technology and it's not doing what we need to do. We've just spent $30,000 and now we need to spend another $50,000. And they're telling me to add this, we spend another $20,000. And so on the one side, founders are feeling like they're hooped in a sense in the process. But on the flip side, when I talk to the developers and say, hey, what's the issue on the developer side? They're often saying to me, hey, Denise, these founders are clear about what they're doing, and so they tell us what they want. They tell us the scope, but then they don't tell us the full information. And so we only give them a quote on the things that they know. But I really see that there's a gap. And then the other thing that I've seen is in the development space is there's soup to nuts, right? In terms of the types of developers that are out there and developers that do the work themselves, have the team, or they outsource the work to people. Or I've even had people and my clients be charged even before they're given a quote for work to be done before they even get a quote. And so I really wanted to kind of have this conversation, a public conversation around this today, just to talk a little bit about the pain points that we're seeing in this space, and then talk a little bit about why it's happening, and then maybe some strategies for how do we fix that, right? So that those non-tech founders get the right information and there's a process on how that information helps them move their business forward, so they're feeling like they know what they need to communicate and they're moving forward. And I say this is a start because I don't think we're going to conquer it all today, but I think we'll be able to unravel some of the mystery around this area with Sep. So Sep, welcome to this talk today, because you're the king in this space and you know the insides and outs here. And so I just really want you to kind of share a little bit. You've been a serial entrepreneur, you've done some really cool things, and now you're helping people in this space. You offer workshops around this. So I thought maybe you could just kind of share with us a little bit about your history. How did you get into business in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm just as stupid as any other entrepreneur who loves to jump off cliffs and not knowing what I'm doing, right? And so I actually originally started my first business in the home automation industry. It's a completely different industry. It was in the construction space. And I started that because, you kind of interact with businesses, you interact in your social life, and you realize, you know what, I can do that better. And we entrepreneurs love saying that, right? Like that's our ambition. It's like, we can do that better. I can do that better. And so I actually started that originally. 10 years later, sold that company. And I actually started getting to the software space because I love the software space. I mean,
and did you start off as a software developer? Was that one of your skill sets, or did you?
No, I finished in marketing. So the reason I actually come out with the experience that I have is because I've been on both sides. I've been a both developer and tech startup, right? And so the workshop that I do is strictly through education on making sure, like, a lot of times they don't see the pitfalls, right, as entrepreneurs because they've never built software. They're experts in their fields, and so I've been doing that for now 5 years. I started we call it Corridor 1.0, which was me being the startup and having the dev team and going through all the struggles that Denise just mentioned. Been there, done that multiple times, and that one failed. But at the end, we got Corridor 2.0, which now I am helping startups basically avoid all the things that I did wrong. So yeah, there's a little history lesson.
Is actually a good way to do it. Costly, but yeah. So Seb, why do you think, why do you think this gap exists, like, in the first place?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So here's the biggest issue that I'll kind of tell everybody here. When you start your software, for some reason there's this stigma that, oh, software is easy, right? And it's kind of one of those things that it's a huge opportunity because of how it can scale and how fast. You're not locked in with a geographic situation, right? You don't have to just sell to Calgary. You can sell to Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Toronto, and so on, right? And so it becomes a really exciting space because it's scalable, right? And because of that scalability, a lot of people go, well, I know my industry so well, I'm going to jump into it. And so they're kind of jumping in without having the knowledge of what the whole process of software development is. And we see this time and time again, right? And when we develop for our clients, we really have to take that back road and really go into the education side of what is software development and what the processes are. And I think that lack of understanding is really what causes a significant amount of friction between the development people, company, whatever you want to call them, versus the non-technical founder who's just genuinely an expert in their field.
Yeah. And just on that note, just so, you're a non-tech founder, you've got this cool idea. The thing I see is that they kind of think that they've communicated. How do you get around that issue where a non-tech founder has said, I want it to do these 5 things and I want it to be able to do this? How do you make sure as a non-tech founder, and we can talk a little bit about it, but how do you make sure that they get the right things in that scope? Because I think one of the things, education is actually first that most people are missing out on. That's that's at the top of the list. And then how do you make sure that scope, that is the communication between the founder and the developer, is clear, right, in terms of what they need?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, development. So here's the biggest problem. The first thing I'll always say to everybody is understand that you're 2 different people, right? Developers are ones and zeros, and you're the creative type, right? And I famously say this in my podcast. I famously say this in my workshop. Being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff with all the plane parts, and you're just hoping to put it together as you're falling, right? Before you hit the ground, you want to get the wings up so you can actually hover and so on, right? So, developers aren't like that. They're not thinking about a product creatively, right? So when you go to let's just consider a dev shop because it's easier. A lot of people will probably have a conversation with dev shops first. When you go to a dev shop, they're not thinking about your business. What they're doing is they're just listening to what you're saying and just getting a list of features, and then basically be like, all right, here's how much it'll cost us to build it. And so this is where I kind of go back to, it's really a misunderstanding, because back in the day, it used to be a founder and a CTO that would work together and build a product, right? And that worked 10 years ago because of the fact that there weren't too many softwares out there. You could have literally come out with crap 10 years ago, and you would have sold the product because you would have been one of the few that actually developed something like that. Now, in today's world, it's so competitive that you genuinely do have to think through your product. You genuinely have to find really good, talented people, because there isn't that many tech talent out there versus how many is being produced, how many companies are being produced today. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's that disconnect that's happening. So now, I don't know if anyone knows here, but the role of product manager has become a big role, right? And I don't know if anyone knows what a product manager is, but product manager is essentially, what they are really versus what they should be is different. But essentially, a product manager is supposed to be the one that manages the communication between what the founder wants, or like the non-technical, or what the business needs, and translate that into product for the dev team to build on. Okay, so we like, you call that the bridge, right? The product manager is essentially the bridge between the business and the development team. And so that is genuinely what's missing when most founders actually go and try to find a CTO. They find a really good advanced technical team, but that technical team can't translate business into product. What they can do is take a product and figure out how to optimize the infrastructure, how to optimize the code, how to optimize the latency, right? No one talks about latency, but it's very important, but no one cares. But hey, you made that button pretty. That's the key, right? So that's why I'm talking about the disconnect, right? The importance, what they do is very different to what business needs. And that's what the product management role is truly about.
Yeah. And one of the things that I often say to people when they're coming to me and saying, hey, Denise, we want to build this thing. That's great. We help on the grant side. Yeah, there's an opportunity. We see there may be funding to support that. And so we help them kind of figure that out. But one of the gaps I see is they don't have that product manager. And so,
Never.
But one of the things that I think is really important, that they have a third set of eyes, or have someone who can play that role. And so if they contract that out, to have someone to kind of be able to be that voice. I have that on my team. It's Conrad. He's here in the call today, and he knows that I'm the non-technical mind, but he has the technical mind that kind of guides me and says, hey, you should pay attention to these things because this is what I think you want. And he helps to articulate that language of the non-tech founder into that. So how do people kind of, where do you find that kind of help? Like, you talked about the different ways to get software developers. Some have it in-house, some don't. And how do you make sure that you get that? Because the challenge with I see, again, is when people are looking for developers, they're getting a quote and they're selling them a story on what they can do and can they do all of it. And I think, how do you figure that out to make sure that you have someone who's on your side to kind of figure that product development piece out?
100%. So the number one thing, in fact, Denise, just so you know, we've actually split our services because of that huge gap that you're talking about with the product management. So what the first thing I'll say is, when you're talking to a dev team, make sure when you're talking to them, make sure you are like kind of hearing out the fact that they're understanding what you're trying to achieve and really do truly understand your business strategy. Okay. So I'll use this as a really good example. Is a lot of times we'll have conversations with our clients and they'll say, and again, it's a thing that happens all the time, but the founder basically comes in and says, I want to take on the system, right? It's always taking on the system, right? And you always, sure, I'll build you whatever you want me to build you, but let me help you how to get to that goal, right? So if you get a dev shop that's actually understanding what you're trying to do and help you in, okay, first we need to take step 1, 2, 3 before we jump to step 30, right? Actually, I got into, back and forth with one of my clients. Well, one of my clients yesterday, where I was like, I get where you're trying to be with the utopia, but you have to take certain steps to get there, right? So understanding the business strategy, I think, is the biggest thing when you're talking to a dev team, because if they don't understand your business strategy, they can't make the moves correctly to get you to that step. Yeah. The second big thing is, do they have are they taking the appropriate steps in the design phase? Okay. And a lot of the bigger guys, and this really bugs me, because as a startup, you have one very particular resource you do not have access to, and that's resource, right? Money, people, you don't have access to any of this stuff, right? You're starting with maybe 50, 100K, 200K, maximum 300K. So when you go talk to the bigger guys, when they